Okay, welcome back, guys. On our last video, we were able to get the data from the form of the user, and we're able to get the reference using the Paystack generate transaction reference. In this video, we'll continue to the point where we make payments with Paystack and fund the user's wallet. So before we move to making the payments, let me have a recap. So we're able to get the amount from a form, able to get the amount from a form, which is here. We're able to get the amount from this form, and we're able to see, and also we're able to see some other required fields, which are the email, user email, then we saw the amount, we saw the reference. These are required. So now from your form also, from this form, you can actually request the user email especially, sorry. I think that's just your email. You can actually, if you want to put quantity and all that is necessary, you can put it on this form. That's the case where possibly the person is not an authenticated user. But in this case, it's an authenticated user, so we could get the email and the reference. We could generate it directly from here without going through an input field to the user. But now also we are going to be creating a table. That's for transaction. We are going to be creating a transaction table where we store these transactions. So we'll make the model. So the name of this model is transaction. So would the model have a factory controller, resource controller, and migration? Said no. Yes, it should have a migration. Should it have a factory? No. The transaction, should it have a controller? No. So once this migration file has been created, we can come here, we put the fields that we need for the migration. So I'll add them. Okay, from here we can see now that the transaction table definitely is going to have the wallet ID, to have the user ID. These are foreign fields. Then to have status to show that it is either pending, failed, or successful. Let me change it to successful. Then it will take the amount and the reference for the transaction. So with these fields available in the transaction, let's go to the wallet controller where we're writing the code. So now for this part here, after generating this guy, now remember that the amount on my funding, on this funding here, I put a charge of 1.5%. So definitely I'm going to ensure that that charge is added on the controller. So in order to ensure the charge is added on the controller on the amount, I'm going to do this. So let me put the charge here. Charge is 15%. 15% is 0.15 times the request amount. So 15% of this. So the total amount will be charge plus request amount. So this will give us the total amount we want. So to make this stuff a round figure, so I round it to, I use the method round to decimal place. So it means my total is in 2 decimal place. And also on the front end, I ensure that whatever thing that is coming here is in 2 decimal place. You can use basic JavaScript to do that. So this is in 2 decimal place. So with that said, now we have to initiate the transaction before we call this Paystack URL. So to initiate the transaction, we write the code for the transaction. So for the transaction, initiating the transaction, we put the transaction ID, which is this user ID here. Then the status definitely is pending. The amount is total. The reference is the reference we've defined here. Then wallet ID is the user Naira wallet ID. Remember, we created the relationship with the user here, which we created the Naira wallet. So this is wallet ID that we're using. Then we store the array of data, which is instead of this request amount, now this will be total. The 100 here is to convert from Kobo to Naira. Put the reference, user email. Then this. Then we store this data. Then redirect. Then for this, after redirecting, it will go to the callback URL. To check our web.php, there's a callback URL. So we have to define this URL. You have to define it. So we define this. So if we check what the handle payment gateway callback does, is that it gets the payment details. So we check this, then we take the payment details. From there, we know the fields we can add to our transaction. So copy this, and on this guy we paste. So let's make a payment and see. So let's try making a payment. Let me put an amount here. Okay, they said auth controller not found. So definitely go to that's wallet controller. So import this auth controller class here. Import, come back, refresh, check transaction, import transaction controller. So refresh this. Oh, sorry, if not migrated. So let me migrate. So run PHP and migrate. So table has been migrated. So immediately we get to Paystack checkout. So once we made the Paystack checkout, we click on success and it loads successful payment. It comes back. It's not really going back to the gateway. So let's see. Okay, sorry, the problem here was that our callback URL was user.dashboard. So instead of coming back directly to users.dashboard on your web.php, you check the callback URL. If you check here is this handle callback, so we put a route. Remember the route name to callback. So what I'll be putting on my callback URL here will be user.callback. Now also for the return paystack get authorization URL where I put the data, I use a try and catch method such that I will catch any exception in case possibly due to network or any other error the URL wasn't gotten, like we didn't get to the URL, so you show an exception. So on this catch here, we'll put the exception, report the exception, put the message, then we put the status. We change this transaction from pending to failed, then we save the transaction, then we return back with an error. You'll try again, but it was successful. It should go to this handled callback. Then we did the payment details. From these payment details, then we'll know what to do with our data. So let's try it out. Back to this, let's say with 500. Let's make payment. So you can see it's checking out already. So here's the payment. We see success. It should redirect after payment successful to handle payments gateway where we did the payment details. So we can see the payment details, we can see the data. Now these data are returning as an array, so you can see that the status here is success. So we are going to be testing for this status. Then our reference, we're going to be using this reference here to check the transaction table to see if we see this particular reference on our transaction table. So let's go back to the controller and do that. So first of all, we check if the details is status is successful. So if payment mean details, we check for the, we're looking at data, then we check for the status. So payment details data status is not equal to this in here is success, right? So we check it here is success. So if it is not equal to success, what should happen? If it's not equal to success, then so if it is not successful, what we just do is just to return back with an error message. So return back with error payment, or we just say an error occurred. Try again. So this will return back with this error message. Then it will tell the user that an error occurred. The user should try again. Now remember the our status, sorry, our transaction will be pending, so nothing was actually added to the user's wallet. But if the transaction was successful, first of all, we are going to get the reference of the transaction, and from the reference we'll get the payment details data. It's an array inside an array, so we'll get the reference. So this is the reference. If you check here again, you're going to see it, the data, then you see the reference. So once the reference has been gotten, we check it out on the transaction. So we check transaction where reference is equal to this our reference. We get the first one. Then once we've gotten the transaction, we'll get the user that is attached to this transaction. So we put transaction underscore user is equals to user find transaction arrow user underscore ID. So you find this user, this particular user that belongs to this transaction. Then also, in case the user got to this place without, maybe the transaction has been successful before, we are going to put a kind of check to check if the transaction has failed or was successful before. Then we return back with an error to the user, telling the user that this transaction has occurred before. So we can see that if the transaction was failed, so this is necessary in case there's any foul play. Maybe somebody injecting something and it got to this URL, or it got to this this controller. So let's also get the user wallet. So we go to the wallet and we find the transaction wallet ID. Let's go ID. So let's import these two classes, user and wallet. So once we see that this condition is surpasses this condition, then we move over to initiate the transaction, change the transaction status to successful. Then save this transaction. Then once the transaction has been saved, then we now credit the user balance. So we go over to the wallet balance. Wallet balance. So we put user underscore wallet balance. We get we are adding this user wallet balance with the amount. But before we add the amount, remember that the charge was added. So we are going to remove the charge and credit the user with the actual amount the user paid. So one thing I'm going to do, instead of rewriting the code of removing these charges and all this stuff from here, from this particular amount, like removing this charge and all that, instead of putting the total here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the request. I'm going to request only the amount here. So this is the amount the user is paying. Then the amount I'm going to be sending to Paystack will be the amount with the charges. So, but this one is just the amount I'm going to credit the user with, such that when I come here, what I'm going to be adding this stuff with is just the transaction amount. So I'm just crediting the user with the transaction amount. Then once this stuff is done, I save the wallet. Then I return back with success, account credited successfully. Success transaction account or payment made successfully. So basically from what I did, the wallet balance here, instead of putting a user wallet, I put just user, instead of putting user wallet arrow balance, I just put user wallet. So what you're adding to is a balance, so put arrow balance here. Then the route will not be returned back, it will be return redirect route. You're returning to the user dashboard, but if you want to return back to where you found the wallet, just put back here with success payment made. Let's test this out. Let's see. 500. Let's make payment. So click on success, payment successful, redirecting to dashboard. Yeah, payment made successfully. So if we increase this, you can see the user has been credited with 500, which is the actual amount. So let's say we want to make a payment of 1000 again. So it's loading, we put successful. You can see now the amount that is coming to Paystack is 1015 Naira. So you're adding the Paystack charge here. So we pay. Once payment is done, return back to dashboard. So returning back to dashboard, payment means, so you can see the amount here is 1005. So that's how you can actually credit a user and update his Naira wallet using Paystack. So there will be no need for this transaction user. So definitely sometimes what I do is mostly I just come here and create the relationship between the user. So if I want to get the user's Naira wallet, so I just create it and put, since there's a relationship, I just put Naira wallet and store it as the user's wallet here. So when I come here, instead of doing user wallet here, instead of using this, I'll now use this particular one, the balance, add it to the transaction amount. So instead of doing this, I might just decide to do this wallet balance plus or equal to this transaction amount and save the wallet balance. But since I'm not going to be doing it that way, that's another method. I just remove this line of code entirely and go directly to find the transaction ID. Then here I put the balance here. So that'll be that for this video. Thank you for staying till the end, and do well to like and subscribe. See you in my next videos.